Hey, how's it going everybody? I've spent the last couple of weeks playing and completing Kingdom Come Deliverance, and after about 60 hours put into this game, I'm just gonna let you know my thoughts and honest review of the game and let you know if you should buy it in 2021. If you're new here and find the video entertaining, I make a lot of reviews like this if you want to check them out, and only about 6% of people who watch my videos are subscribed, so you can subscribe if you want. If not, no big deal. Anyways, let's get back to the review. I've had my eye on Kingdom Come Deliverance for quite some time now, but I had put off on playing it for a while because I knew that this game would take a lot of time to finish. And it sure did. It took me about 60 hours to finish the story, with doing a fair amount of side content, but still nowhere near all the game had to offer. This is a huge open world RPG through and through. This type of classic RPG is certainly not for everyone. People who prefer lots of action and intensity are likely not going to enjoy this game. It's very slow paced, and the game features a lot of talking with NPCs and just a lot of running errands back and forth to people. The pacing really felt a bit similar to The Witcher 3, however The Witcher 3's story was a lot more intriguing for me, and the side quests were a lot of fun in that game. Now that's not to say the side quests in this game aren't fun, a lot of them are, but there's also just a lot that feel like time wasters and are primarily meant for just giving you busy work rather than an entertaining story. Now the story itself, it's alright. The voice acting isn't anything tremendous, and the animations are clearly automated, which is normal for a big RPG like this, but makes the characters look very stiff and almost non-human in dialogue. The handcrafted cutscenes of course look much better, but those are pretty far and few between, but they're still in there in the crucial moments when needed. The main character Henry, nothing too special. There's nothing really super lovable or intriguing about his personality. His story arc is the all too familiar revenge plot that we see in a lot of games. However, what I really like about Henry isn't so much about his character, and more so about the journey he goes on. Henry goes through a lot in this game, and when you really look back to what he was like at the beginning and compare it to the end, he truly does feel like an entirely different character. It's not like he has any insane development changes in his personality or attitude, but he just gets a lot stronger and his lifestyle changes drastically. I'm sure this is no surprise, but he starts off as a naive boy getting into fights and pranking people to a knight fighting in a big war. This game does feature dialogue choices and gives you a lot of freedom in how you choose to approach your mission, whether you prefer brute force and fighting, stealth, or maybe persuasion and manipulation. The way this game is built really supports all of these playstyles and allows you to tailor them around your build. Now that's not to say if you're a stealth build you won't ever have to fight, or if you're a strength build you won't ever have to use stealth, but for the most part how you play is up to you, which I had a lot of fun with. The dialogue choices can heavily impact your results in a mission, and each choice has its own benefits and consequences. This game really makes you think strategically and carefully before you make a choice, as it can either make your time on the game easy or extremely challenging. Your choices can also improve skills like charisma, speech, vitality, etc., and depending on your skill level in each branch, you have a good chance of either threatening or persuading NPCs into doing what you want. Reputation is also a pretty large thing in this game. Your reputation is how NPCs perceive you and determines how willing they are to help you or be kind to you. Things like appearances, smell, and even previous actions can change your dialogue outcomes. For example, an NPC is going to be much kinder and more respectful towards you if you're a clean and presentable knight in shining armor rather than a dirty and cut up peasant. And the NPCs gossip among each other, so maybe if you've helped someone in need, others will be a lot nicer and accepting of you. But perhaps you stole something or killed someone, and some people may flat out refuse to talk to you. Your reputation and public image is really important in this game, and I thought that was a really cool feature because everything you do must be strategic, because just running around killing everyone like I often did certainly doesn't do you any favors. This game really didn't support my violent tendencies as an assassin, and I was often punished with lots of fines and jail time. Another thing I really enjoyed about this game is the ability to create your own stories within its world. I beat this guy named Black Peter in the Ratai tournament, and later he showed up and set an ambush outside my house to try and kill me so he could claim his revenge. Granted, Peter died a horrible death and I cut his head off, but it's such a cool thing to be able to create your own stories, and it really adds to the realism and liveliness of the game. Now as I said earlier though, this game plays out very slow. The main story especially. It's a lot of talking, lots of investigations and fetch quests, and every once in a while you can partake in some really cool action and fights. But you have to cut through a lot of boring and filler moments to get to them. This This really isn't anything new for RPGs though, and it's one of my biggest issues with games like this. This game is absolutely one of those games where you really have to give it time and effort before it can really start to be enjoyable. And I know a lot of you probably don't like that, but once you're about, I don't know, about 5 to 10 hours in and you start to get the hang of things, that's when it really becomes fun. The gameplay heavily enforces that everything in this game has a steep learning curve to it. The combat especially. When I first started the game, I absolutely sucked at the combat. I thought it was confusing and challenging, and just beating one simple bandit was a struggle. The combat takes time to learn, and eventually you can master it. Some people may hate that idea and some others may love it. It's really based on what you personally like. I lean more towards this idea of having to learn and get better at the combat, and it's always really cool to reflect and look back on how much better I got. But what I really love about this is how much it ties in with the story. It makes sense for Henry to be horrible at fighting at first because he's never done it before. He's never wielded a sword, so he's a beginner just like you. And as you get better and master the combat, so does Henry through the story. And it's a perfect example of story and gameplay working hand in hand to create a strong narrative. Now, it doesn't always work perfectly like this because this is still an open world where you can kill and fight anything with a pulse, which me slaughtering dozens of innocent civilians and robbing them certainly doesn't match with Henry's actions through the story, but it doesn't matter much to me because I just considered myself to be a noble knight by day and a thieving assassin by night. And the game supports this playstyle. Well, as long as you don't get caught, and trust me, you will get caught. But that's what makes pulling off a successful heist so thrilling and enjoyable. I really enjoyed the freedom of creating your own build, and the game has perks and levels that will support your build. Like for me, who went more towards stealth, I had a lot of perks that made my footsteps quieter, or more efficiency with my lockpicks so I could break into places easier. Combat has perks like more stamina, health regeneration, and being able to win weapon clinches. The amount of detail and depth in this game's gameplay is very noticeable, and it makes it feel that much more realistic and immersive. You have to eat to stay properly nourished, you have to sleep to regenerate your energy and health, and depending on the comfort level of where you sleep will determine how quickly you regain said energy. You can also overeat, causing your character to become slow and clumsy. There is so many systems and buffs packed into this game that it takes a while just for you to properly understand what it all means, and it will certainly be overwhelming at first, but again, if you give it time, you'll eventually understand them quite well. The armor and clothing options also have just as much detail. The darker clothing you wear, the less conspicuous and visible you are to NPCs. If you're wearing full plate armor, enemies are going to hear your armor clanking from a mile away, as compared to when you're wearing light armor or robes that make very little noise. If you decide to go the thief route like me, you have to be careful where you sell your stolen goods because shopkeepers and guards may recognize it and turn you in or confiscate it from you. I love how this game really forces you to think about every little detail and create a plan, because if you just do whatever you want, causing mayhem like you may in a lot of games, like GTA per se, if you do that in Kingdom Come Deliverance, the game is certainly going to punish you unless you're smart and strategic about it. Even though the stealth system in this game is fairly basic and the detection can be a little broken at times, like people spotting you through walls, I still found it a lot of fun, and I loved how much freedom and tools the game left at my disposal, like lockpicks, poison, daggers, etc. Again, this game has so much to offer gameplay wise that it's going to be very frustrating and overwhelming to new players, but if you stick it out for a few hours and get to understand the learning curves, especially with the combat, then the game is going to become gradually a much better experience. But that all depends on if you're willing to learn and be patient with the game, because I know a lot of people just prefer to hop in and get straight to the action. So like I said before, Kingdom Come Deliverance is not everyone's cup of tea. Kingdom Come Deliverance has a large and immersive open world. The sheer amount of NPCs roaming around, interacting with each other, doing their jobs, and even interacting with you as you pass by makes the game world feel like it's living and breathing, even when you're not in it. NPCs all have a set day and night cycle, so depending on the time of day, there will be different amounts of people out and about. Like in the middle of the day, you can see everyone walking around, working. Then at night, everyone's in their homes sleeping, with just a few guards keeping watch watch over the towns in the darkness of the night. Another great example of just the level of detail the game world has is in one of the side missions I had to do. I had to choose a certain amount of people to do a water carrying job for the city, and the next day I could actually see the people I chose going to and from the city carrying water, which may seem like a silly thing to point out, but it just speaks to the level of detail and realism this world has to offer. The world really supports this general sense of freedom the game gives you, and you can go and do just about anything you want. There's shops, taverns, homes scattered all over that you can visit and indulge in, and if you're like me, you can even start up your own little thieving business where you can break into those homes and shops, steal everything, and then sell it off for a nice, tidy profit. The atmosphere also really nails the medieval vibe, in large part thanks to the architecture of the homes and castles, and especially the ambient music that plays as you roam the world. And the graphics, while certainly not the best I've ever seen and is by no means revolutionary, they still look pretty good. Where the real issue lies is in performance. On console, this isn't really something you need to worry about. However, I'm sure the game has drops and texture pop-in on there, but for PC users, the performance is very inconsistent and at times can be pretty bad. At 1440p on my RTX 2070 Super and i5 9600K, I get around 90 to 100 FPS, but that's out in open fields and small towns. In the large cities like Ratai, that could drop to 50 to 70 FPS, and in large skirmishes I even dropped into the 40s and even 30s one time. The handcrafted cutscenes are also locked at 1080p 30 FPS, which was a little disappointing, but really the main issue is the inconsistency and frame drops. If you have a high-end PC build, I wouldn't worry about it too much, but for those of you with a not so great PC, this game may be very hard for you to run, so I'd make sure you can run it well before purchasing it. And even though this game has received many updates and has been out for a few years now, it can still be really buggy and clunky to play. The AI especially are really glitchy, the combat can at times feel janky and not properly register hits, and some of the missions themselves have some weird bugs where you can't talk to some people, or sometimes they'll glitch through walls, all sorts of bugs really. And I even had a few glitches where I would just be stuck on a cutscene loading screen and had to Alt F4 out of the game, so beware of these issues. Nothing too game breaking, but definitely noticeable and at times very annoying. Kingdom Come Deliverance was a roller coaster for me. In the beginning, I found it very overwhelming and confusing. Towards the middle is where I had my most fun and really understood the game. And then by the end, after about 35 hours, the game started to feel kind of dull and a bit boring. The mission structure is very tedious and slow at times, and it made the game just feel plain out boring sometimes. However, the story was okay, the learning curve with the combat and stealth was a fun challenge, and the world is very immersive. Not to mention, the game is extremely detailed all the way through. But again, this kind of game is very tailored to patient single-player games who don't mind the slow pace and learning curve the game has to offer. I personally prefer action-adventure games, but I can still appreciate and enjoy games like this. So I'm gonna give Kingdom Come Deliverance a 3 out of 5 stars. And I'd recommend it to RPG fans at a sale. It's a good experience overall, and it's a very long game, so you're more than getting your money's worth. People who largely prefer action and fast-paced games will probably want to stay away from Kingdom Come Deliverance. But that's my opinion on the game, and I'd like to hear yours on it in the comments, and let me know if this helped you decide whether or not to pick up the game. Anyways, thanks for watching, and have a blessed day, Assassins.